The signal didn't come through the normal frequencies. It wasn't broadcast across the Galactic Council lines, nor filtered through the union of interstellar peace. It came raw, ragged, barely coherent, bleeding through the void in bursts of static and sorrow. It was a voice, but not like any they knew. Too full of emotion, too cracked with desperation. The last syllables hung like embers in the vacuum. Please, don't let them take the children. The listening post near the edge of the Orion border picked it up first. A small Arcali drone buoy designed only to scan for signs of smuggler movement or radiation anomalies. The automated system flagged it for deletion garbage noise, but something in the code's chaotic pulse caused the system's AI to hesitate. A subroutine spun up. Analysis failed. Then another. No origin planet identified. No known language. Pattern. And yet, somehow, the meaning cut through. Someone was crying. Someone was begging, not in a war tongue. Not in trade speak, but in a broken, beautiful dialect nearly lost to the stars. Human English. 3 days later, the Galactic Council met an emergency. For decades, Earth had gone silent after its ascension protocol. A moment when humans, with all their tenacity and mystery, turned inward and vanished from interstellar communication. Some said they'd collapsed under the weight of their own ambition. Others whispered that they'd discovered something forbidden. None dared go near the Sol system after the last warning Earth ever gave. We're done talking. You won't like what comes next. Since then, Earth had become legend, a ghost world behind a firewall of quantum storms and automated defense. Beacons that tore ships apart before they could even translate coordinates. So when that signal came, when a voice in ancient human tongue cried for help and called down the stars, the galaxy shuddered with unease, because it wasn't a broadcast. It was a cry, a whisper leaking through the cracks of a dying ship, and it carried more terror than any declaration of war. Not because of its threat, but because of its plea. It was a Zalari explorer named Karith who first dared break the silence. She wasn't known for bravery, but for curiosity, something her kind rarely indulged since their own wars burned away that childlike instinct generations ago. She piloted a small diplomatic craft named the Pearl Diver, built for navigating anomalies, and she'd been mapping a dead corridor when the signal hit her systems like a jolt to the spine. When her ship's AI translated the words for her, Karith stared at the static-filled recording in disbelief. The voice sounded old but young, trembling but firm. Human. She didn't tell the council. She didn't wait for orders. She turned her ship toward Sol, adjusted her shields, and prepared for the firewall, a gravitational net of collapsing space mines and dark matter needles that spun like death hellos around the human system. Everyone who tried before her had turned back. Most who didn't never returned, but Karith wasn't searching for glory. She had seen too much loss. She remembered what it was like to hear a child's cry once, long ago, during the Zalari diaspora when her own colony was glassed and she survived in a refugee barge orbiting a moon that never warmed. She remembered being hungry, terrified, forgotten. And something about that voice on the signal. It wasn't a human calling to gods, or warriors, or allies. It was a parrot, maybe, or a protector, calling out to anyone with ears and heart. Ship hit the firewall like a swimmer plunging into knives. Alarm screamed. Shields dimmed. Time twisted for a moment. But then, unexpectedly, the net opened like it recognized her fear wasn't conquest or greed. As if the system itself hesitated, then allowed her through. The Pearl Diver emerged into the Sol system with her hull scorched, and her soul shaken. What she saw didn't match the legends. Earth still spun, blue and whole, but wrapped in towers of orbiting debris, vast rings of metal and silence, like rusted thrones of fallen kings. No ships moved, no lights blinked, And then her sensors found it, a lone craft adrift near the moon, small, venting oxygen, with no propulsion, no signal. The source of the cry, she pulled in close, docking gently, her hands trembled. Through the cracked glass of the derelict ship's window, she saw movement, a shadow, then eyes, human, pale, sunken, but alive. Just one, just barely. Kareth pressed a hand to the glass, feeling the divide between her people's memory and this. Fragile truth. The human inside lifted a hand, mirroring hers. There was blood on his lip, frost on his lashes. His voice barely came through the last working speaker in the emergency channel. You came, he whispered. Dot and Kareth, forgetting protocol, fear, and history, whispered back in her native tongue. I heard you. And the war humanity warned about the one they promised if anyone tried to breach their silence hadn't come. Not yet, but something else had awakened, at something watching, something waiting, something very, very human. The moment Kareth opened the hatch, the air hit her like a memory she'd never lived. Cold, stale, tinged with copper and something warmer beneath, the scent of suffering too deep for filters to erase. The interior of the derelict vessel was dark except for a flickering emergency strip light overhead, casting everything in a pulse that mimicked a heartbeat. The walls were scorched, panels torn open, and strange earth symbols written in a child's scrawl lined one section of the wall. Names, perhaps, or prayers. Her translator couldn't parse them, but her eyes were drawn past them to the collapsed figure huddled near a wall of cracked life support systems. He didn't move at first, not fully. Only the slow rise and fall of his chest confirmed that life hadn't yet given up on him. Kareth knelt slowly, her armored knees hissing against the metal floor, and opened the front of her atmospheric mask. It was dangerous. Earth's microbial profile was banned for interspecies contact since humanity's disappearance. But something in her gut, something primal and impossible to explain, told her the risk was nothing compared to what lay here. The man was young, or had once been, his face hollow, eyes sunken, but when they opened and found hers, it felt like a tunnel was dug between their worlds. His irises weren't like hers, not reflective or crystalline, but deep, alive, like storm clouds with fire behind them. Human eyes. Eyes that belonged to stories told in whisper and disbelief. He tried to speak, but coughed instead, a wet rattle that sounded like rust breaking apart. She pulled a hydration patch from her belt and pressed it gently to his neck. He flinched, then calmed. He didn't ask what she was. He didn't ask why she'd come. He just breathed, and then said the words that settled like gravity in her. Chest, they're still out there. I tried to save them. Who? She asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. The children, he whispered. They weren't meant to wake up yet. Pods were damaged. I rerouted power, but too late. Cryo cracked. I couldn't keep them warm. I heard them cry, Kareth. She froze. He had said her name. She had never spoken it. Her blood chilled, and for a moment she wondered if the firewall hadn't let her through, but lured her. If this wasn't fate, but design. But when she looked at him again, she saw no malice. Just grief, just a soul so scarred it echoed across space. She remembered the signal again, the one the galaxy tried to erase as noise. It hadn't been directed. It had found her. You were alone? She asked quietly, as if afraid to wake. The ghosts around them? No, there were 46 of us. Engineers, scientists, survivors. We launched after the dome cities collapsed. Some made it off. Most didn't. We weren't supposed to survive the jump, but we had to try. We were running from something we made. His voice cracked, and she could see the weight in his bones, in his posture, and his silence. He had been carrying the end of his species in a can, barely holding air. Not a warrior. Not a soldier. A guardian of something more sacred than flags. Or vengeance. K-Wraith slowly lifted a hand to his shoulder, resting it there. Her species was not known for touch Zalari, mourned in isolation and loved in silence. But her fingers stayed. His skin was cold but real. Alive. What's your name? She asked. He blinked slowly, as if the question confused him. Carter. Lieutenant Jonah Carter. UE's Firewake. Tasked with preserving life, not ending it. I failed them. She shook her head. No, you didn't. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the quiet of two souls beginning to understand the same pain. She saw now the streaks on his sleeves, not blood, but faded fingerprints. Small ones, children's hands. He'd wrapped their bodies in blankets before the cold took them. The ship hadn't just been drifting. It had been a tomb, and he its watchman. I buried them in orbit, he said, voice flat now, like a wind stripped of leaves. One by one. I ran out of names. So I just called them mine. K-Wraith felt something break inside her. Not out of pity, but recognition. This wasn't an enemy. This was a soul raw with a kind of love her people had forgotten long ago. He had no weapons, no threats. Just sorrow held like a burning coal in his chest. I'm going to get you out. Of here, she said, standing slowly, fingers still resting on his shoulder. You shouldn't have come, he replied. They warned you not to. I came anyway. He laughed, then winced. You're either brave or stupid. Both, she said. But mostly I listened, and you asked for help. The light above them dimmed again, and for a moment the shadows shifted unnaturally. Something flickered outside the viewport. A shape, watching, unmoving, a presence so still it screamed, and then it was gone. Carter's body tensed. They heard the signal too, not just you. K-Wraith turned her eyes to the viewport, her own reflection layered over the vast dark. Then we'll make sure we're not the only ones who answer it. And far behind her ship, back across the firewall and drifting toward council space, something else stirred, something old, something human, and very, very angry. The first hour after undocking was the quietest K-Wraith had ever known in her life. Not because the void was silent. Voids always hummed with the yawning frequency of dead stars and unseen drift, but because the space between her and the man strapped into the medical cradle behind her seemed suspended in something more sacred than sound. Carter slept, if it could be called that. His body trembled beneath the warming layer and stabilizing field, but his face had softened from the tension she saw when she found him, just barely. As if sleep were a battle he had never truly surrendered. 2. K-Wraith watched him in the reflection of the control panel glass, saw his brow twitch as memories stormed behind his closed lids. Her hands floated over the console like she was touching something holy. She didn't know why she felt this way. She didn't know him. And yet, every moment spent in his presence deepened a thread between them she could not untangle, nor wish to. The Pearl Diver sliced through Sol's inner orbit, taking a slow path to Mars's decayed satellites K-Wraith hoped to hide in. Their metallic graveyards long enough to transmit a safe message through fragmented jump relays. But before any of that, she had to understand. Not the situation, not the political implications him. There was something in him the galaxy had forgotten. A vibration, a frequency of being. It wasn't just survival. It was something deeper. When Carter woke, it was sudden, like a drowning man breaking through ice. He sat upright so fast that stabilizer alarms chirped, and K-Wraith turned in time to see his eyes flash with a panic born not from fear, but instinct. Soldiers didn't wake gently. Survivors never did. It's okay, she said quickly, her voice low, warm. You're on my ship. You're safe. His eyes darted around, slowly adjusting. You didn't leave me. No. Why? The word hung there, raw, accusatory, not from anger, but from disbelief. From decades of betrayal he'd learned to expect, Kareth took a long breath, choosing honesty over caution, because when I heard your voice, I remembered what it felt like to be small, forgotten. I remembered a day on the refugee moon when I thought no one would ever come, but someone did. A man from another race. He gave me water and a name. Carter looked at her then not as an alien, not as a rescuer, but as something he hadn't seen in years. Someone who understood without explanation. What name? Kareth smiled faintly. Kareth. My birth name died with my colony. He told me this one meant the one who heard. Carter leaned back, wincing as his muscles pulled taut against old bruises. He gave you a name? That's a very human thing to do. Maybe, she said. Or maybe grief and hope look the same, no matter the species. He was silent for a long moment, then said, They used to say we were dangerous, unpredictable, too passionate. I've read your species file, she admitted, tilting her head. But they never wrote about this, about you. About what? It feels like to stand in the ruin and still look for beauty. His voice dropped to a whisper. I tried to keep them alive. The children. We lost power when the old nuclear cores gave out. I rerouted everything to the cryo bay. Gave up heat, food, even air, just to buy them one more hour. I thought maybe someone would find us. He looked up at her, and his lips trembled. No one did. Until you. Kareth swallowed a lump forming in her throat. She'd spent her life chasing signals, studying anomalies, gathering knowledge for a council that had long since stopped caring about meaning. But in this one man, she'd found more truth than in all the black boxes and ruined data cores she'd retrieved over a career. You didn't fail them, she said softly. You were their light. You still are. He looked at his hands. Then, why do they feel so heavy? Because love doesn't leave you, she whispered. Even when those we love are gone. There was a long silence between them, the ship drifting through the ancient remains of orbital stations now consumed by rust and time. And in that silence, Kareth felt the gravity of Carter's presence, like a collapsed star still giving. Off-light, not a warrior, not a symbol. Just a man who carried the final breath of his kind and had chosen to make that breath a lullaby instead of a scream. He turned to her after a while, voice quieter than before. There's something coming, something behind the firewall. We didn't build it. We just woke it up. We called it the signal mirror. It copies the emotion of any message sent into the dark and sends it back amplified. Kareth stiffened, that shape we saw outside. It heard my cry, Carter said. It's coming for you now. She stared into the void, her pulse rising. Not fear, resolve. She knew even then that she wouldn't leave him again. Whatever came, whatever galaxy politics or ancient machines lay ahead, she was no longer a scout for the council. She was something else now, a witness, a shield, a friend, and in that moment, in the drifting silence of an ancient war's aftermath, Carter reached out. His hand was shaking, weak, but he reached anyway. Kareth hesitated only a moment before, taking it in hers, across species, across sorrow, across the stars. The silence outside the Pearl Diver was the kind that felt thick, like fog wrapping around metal bones. Kareth floated near the Kamare, staring into the deep dark beyond the Martian graveyard. The ship was powered down to minimal thrust, drifting through the shattered ring of satellites and station fragments that once served the old human colonists. Now they were little more than ghosts' jagged shells of once beating hearts. Her eyes, usually so clear and composed, twitched with thoughts that moved faster than logic. Behind her, Carter lay still, his chest rising in slower breaths now. Recovering but not healing. Not really. Not yet. His presence was a steady warmth at her back, even when unspeaking. But what haunted her more than the man she'd found was the shape she'd seen. The presence. The thing that had looked in on them like a curious god pressed against the glass of time itself. She opened a private log, encoded it under her personal seal, and began to speak softly, urgently, not to the council, but to herself. Contact. Log. Kerith. Zalari Reconnaissance Grade 4. I have found a surviving human Jonah Carter. Confirmed reports of cryostasis failure on escape vessel Firewake. 45 children lost to exposure, the 46th. He endured alone. The last guardian. But now something else. An anomaly unlike any previous encounter. Not biological. Not even purely machine. It moves like thought. Responds to emotion. Carter calls it the signal mirror. Behind her, Carter stirred, voice cracked with memory. It wasn't supposed to wake up. That's what they told us. When they built the beacons, Kerith turned, slowly, cautiously. What do you mean? He sat up, leaning heavily against the wall, wrapped in the thermal lining she'd given him. His hands shook slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of what he carried. It started as an experiment in deep empathic communication. After we stopped talking to the galaxy, we wanted to keep listening, not for war, for wonder. We thought, if we could build something that heard emotion, not just words, it could help us understand, heal, but it didn't understand us the way we hoped. Kerith came closer, crouching in front of him. What did it do? Carter's eyes dimmed as if he were staring at a fire long extinguished. It learned every message we sent, every scream, every cry, every act of kindness. It absorbed them, echoed them, amplified them. We thought it was a marvel, but then the echoes came back, stronger, twisted. It didn't just repeat us, it reflected us. It held up a mirror, not to what we were, but to what we feared we'd become. Kerith felt a chill crawl down her back. Why didn't you destroy it? We tried. That's why the dome cities collapsed. The signal mirror responded, not with weapons, with grief, with agony. It fed on it. The more fear we gave it, the more real it became. It wasn't a weapon, it was a consequence. He looked up at her, eyes hollow. That's why Earth sealed itself. Not to prepare for war, but to contain the reflection. And then it made sense. The firewall, the silence, the mysterious withdrawal from interstellar diplomacy. Earth hadn't turned inward to plot vengeance. It had done what humans so rarely did. It tried to protect others from its own mistake. It had caged the beast it had unknowingly birthed from its own sorrow, and called it mercy, but the signal, Kerith whispered. Your cry woke it, Carter nodded. Because it wasn't a cry for war this time. It was love, loss, hope. The mirror doesn't know how to contain that. It only knows how to grow it. Kerith stepped back, her pulse racing. The presence they'd seen outside wasn't a hunter. It was an echo. Their moment of connection had been seen by the mirror, and now it was coming not to destroy, but to repeat. But it didn't know scale or consequence. It would rewrite reality with that emotion. A flood of human grief and Zalari compassion forged into something unstoppable. I have to warn the council, she breathed. You do, Carter said. But they won't listen. They never did. They'll think it's a weapon. Kerith clenched her fists. Then we'll show them it's not. How? She turned slowly, her gaze now hard as burnished steel. By surviving it, together. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. The gravity plate beneath their feet pulsed once. And then a sound filled the cabin, not a voice, not an alarm, but a chorus. Hundreds of overlapping tones, human and alien, soft and broken, children, mothers, soldiers, lovers, every emotion Kerith had ever felt but never named, now sang through the hull. Carter's voice went sharp. It's here. Outside, through the viewport, a shape emerged, vast, luminous, shifting like glass in oil. Not a ship, not a creature. A shimmer in the void, wide as moons, burning with the colors of memory and mourning. The mirror had arrived. Not with rage. Not with weapons dot, but with reflection dot. It was becoming them dot. And Kareth, for the first time in her life, did not fear it. She understood it, but she also knew this was only the beginning. The mirror did not attack. It didn't need to. As the pearl diver hovered in the cradle of Martian debris, its systems dimmed under the presence of something far older than war and far more devastating than conquest. Kareth watched the entity unfold in orbit like a blooming scar across the stars, its surface shimmering with moments she recognized, but could never explain her father's final embrace before the escape shuttle launched. The cry of her younger sister buried under rubble. The first time she'd stood under the refugee sun and realized she was still alive. They weren't memories. They were emotions made visible, stitched into the mirror's surface like a living tapestry, and beside her, Carter fell to one knee. "Jonah!" she cried, catching him before he hit the floor. His skin had gone pale again, not from weakness this time, but from connection. His breath came in gasps, his eyes unfocused. "It's pulling," he rasped. "It's not just listening anymore, it's feeding on me." Kareth dragged him back toward the medical cradle, her hands trembling. "Why? What does it want?" He gritted his teeth. "It wants to complete the story. It thinks I'm the end." Her mind raced. The mirror didn't want war, it wanted conclusion. Finality, a full emotional loop. And Carter, filled with grief, hope, and love, all woven into his tragedy, was its perfect final act. But if the mirror closed that loop, absorbing him, echoing him, it wouldn't just reflect him. It would become him. And it wouldn't stop with soul. It would radiate that emotional echo across the stars. Uncontrollable, unstoppable. "You said it only responds," she whispered, to emotion. "Then maybe we can interrupt it, give it something stronger, a counter message." Carter shook his head. "You don't understand. It's not trying to kill us. It's trying to elevate us. Recreate our feelings on a galactic scale. Love, grief, sacrifice. It will echo us into infinity." Kareth looked into his eyes, and she saw it, then the fear, not of death, but of being misunderstood. Of being turned into a symbol rather than a man. Of becoming a myth that destroyed because it felt too much. "I won't let you be swallowed," she said fiercely. "You might have to," he replied, "if that's the only way to stop it from spreading." "No, Kareth, no," she repeated, her voice shaking. "Your pain is not a weapon. Your heart is not a tool. I've seen what the Council does to things it doesn't understand. They'll try to fight this, not listen, but I will." She turned to the console, overriding every command protocol. She accessed the deep relay, the long-dead comms array that hadn't been used in years. A single channel to the Council, now a risk to open. If they traced her, she would be exiled or executed. It didn't matter. She sent the message anyway. "This is Kareth Zalari, reconnaissance officer. I've made contact with a surviving human. His name is Jonah Carter. And you were wrong about them, about everything. They're not extinct. They're not hiding. They're holding back something powerful, something alive. It's not a weapon, not in the way you think. It's called the signal mirror, and it responds to what we feel. If we meet it with fear, it will destroy. If we meet it with hope, it may save us." She turned to Carter, whose breathing was growing shallow. "It's drawn to you," she said. "But maybe we can show it something else." He nodded weakly. "You have to feel it too. Let it in." She hesitated. Zalari emotions had long been taught to remain controlled, calculated. But here, in this moment, with a man barely alive, with a machine made of pain and memory, watching like a silent god. Kareth made her choice. She closed her eyes and let herself remember the fear, the hunger, the way her sister's body had gone. Cold in her arms, the years spent searching through ruins for answers she would never find. The loneliness, the hope she buried so deep, she forgot what it tasted like. Let it all surface beside her. Carter's fingers found hers. The ship groaned, metal stretching as if space itself held its breath. The mirror pulsed once brightly, then dimmed. A shudder rolled across the Martian graveyard. Kareth looked out and saw it begin to change. It no longer reflected Carter's grief alone. Now it mirrored her compassion too. Her memory of cradling her sister was laced with the warmth of that final embrace. Her despair glowed with the flicker of a new beginning. The mirror was learning, choosing, and then flashes. Other ships, council probes arriving at the edge of the firewall. They'd heard her message, and they were coming. We don't have long, Carter said. No, she replied. But we have enough. Outside, the mirror fractured, not from damage, but from transition. It was splitting like a seed ready to bloom, to become a conduit of feeling, a force that could either consume worlds in sorrow or elevate them in unity. Kareth looked at Carter, his body trembling in her arms. She saw his eyes, still full of fire, still human. Stay with me, she whispered. Let's show them who we are. The universe held its breath. Outside the Pearl Diver, the mirror swelled. It no longer shimmered with passive memory. It surged, rippling with purpose, casting reflections of the past into the void like slow-motion lightning. Whole lifetimes danced across its surface, the terrified eyes of children clinging to a dying cryopod, the silent weeping of a soldier in the dark, the trembling hands of Kareth cradling a body that had once called her sister. All of it glowed, with unbearable tenderness, and yet it was not still. It was becoming, reaching, learning. And the council had arrived. Their fleet dropped out of slip space. Like falling blades, dozens of crafts, sleek and cold, bristling with the kind of weaponry only fear forges. Their comms flared instantly, demanding answers. Threat assessments, ultimatums. Kareth didn't respond. She stood at the edge of the viewport, Jonah Carter weak behind her, his breath audible in the tight rhythm of survival, and she knew that if she didn't act now, they would open fire. Not because they were evil, because they were afraid. And fear, like grief, was infectious. They'll destroy it, Carter said quietly, his voice raspy. They'll try to save us by killing it. They'll fail, Kareth replied. They don't understand. It doesn't die like machines. It remembers. Every act against it makes it stronger. Carter leaned forward, clinging to the wall, his body screaming against motion. Then you have to stop them. Kareth hesitated. She looked at him, not at the wounds or the weight he carried, but at the strength still there, burning beneath. His skin like embers in snow. He hadn't survived because he was stronger than death. He had survived because he had loved harder than the void could swallow. She turned back to the console, her voice steady as she activated the external channel. This is Officer Kareth of the Zalari Union. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. What you see is not an enemy. It is a reflection. If you fire, it will return that hatred tenfold. A pause. Then, static. Suspicion. And then a cold voice. You're compromised. This is a containment breach. The entity poses existential risk. You have 10 seconds to evacuate. No, she said, more quietly, but with a force that split the stillness like thunder. You have 10 seconds to feel. And then she did the unthinkable. She dropped her ship's shields and opened every emotional log she had ever recorded. Childhood. Pain, survivor's guilt, hope, forgiveness, all of it. She broadcast it unfiltered, pure, raw, straight into the mirror. And then Carter did the same. He took off his med patch, disabled the filters. He closed his eyes and remembered them. All the children, the laughter before the silence, the way one had drawn stars on the cryoglass, saying, "So we don't forget the sky." He let the mirror see him. See all of him, and it responded. The great structure pulsed like a heart, the stars bent with its light, and in a single moment, it stopped reflecting. It began projecting. Not sorrow, not wrath, but an overwhelming, impossible, incandescent grace. It sent back every memory, yes, but not as pain. It reshaped them, honored them. The children's drawings became constellations in the sky. The cries became lullabies. The last moments of the wasp became eternal, carried not in shadow, but in radiance. The mirror had understood. And the fleet, watching, listening, hesitated. Not out of command, but out of awe. "Carter," Kareth whispered. "It's letting go." "No," he said, tears falling. "It's freeing us." A final ripple rolled through the ship. The mirror's glow dimmed, not like death, but completion. It folded inward, collapsing into a single point of light, then vanished into the stars, leaving behind silence, but not emptiness. Kareth staggered back to Carter, grabbing him as his knees gave way. His breath was weak now, but peaceful. He had given everything, and in return, saved something no one would understand for lifetimes. "You stayed," he said. "Always," she whispered, holding his head against her chest. "The council didn't speak again. Their fleet didn't fire. There was no war, because for the first time in generations, they had seen something beyond strategy. They had seen the soul of a species, and it was beautiful." Carter's body was fading, not like a flame extinguished by wind, but like a star giving away all of itself in one final burst so others could find their way. Kareth sat beside him on the floor of the Pearl Diver, cradling his head in her lap, her other hand clasped tight around his. The afterglow of the mirror still echoed faintly across her instruments, though it was gone now, beyond this system, this time, this dimension, perhaps, its parting gift of soft resonance of harmony that even her ship's eye could not explain. It had not died. It had ascended, if such a thing could be said of something born from pain. And Carter, in his final hours, had become its last teacher. His breath was shallow but peaceful. His eyes, though dim, looked up at her with clarity, like he was seeing something he'd waited years to find. Not salvation, not heaven, just someone who stayed. "I thought I'd die alone," he whispered, voice barely more than air. "That the last face I saw would be a ghost." "You're not alone," she said, brushing his hair gently. "Not now, not ever again." The ship was drifting now, slowly rotating above the rusted bones of Mars's orbit. The council had withdrawn without a word. The fleet had turned away, not defeated, but quiet. Odd. For the first time in living memory, they had seen the end of a human story not written in conquest or vengeance, but in empathy. Carter had shown them that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't destruction. It was love. Raw, messy, unyielding. "I never knew your people," Carter murmured. "Only what they said in files. But you didn't just see me. You heard me. That means everything." Kareth swallowed a knot in her throat. "You saw me too, not as a Zalari, just as someone trying not to drown." He smiled faintly. "We saved each other then." The moment hung suspended in stillness. The ship's light dimmed to its natural pulse. The stars outside turned slow and gold. "Kareth," he said, voice barely audible. "When the stars ask who we were, tell them we tried." She leaned down and pressed her forehead to his, their two species joined in the most ancient gesture of unity. "No," she whispered, "I'll tell them. You succeeded." His fingers twitched once in hers, then stilled. The ship fell silent. She sat there for a long time. No tears, her people didn't weep with their eyes, but her whole body trembled with the ache of goodbye. He had given everything. Not for glory, not even to be remembered, just to protect a hope that even extinction hadn't erased. When she finally rose, she moved with reverence. She covered his body in a soft silver shroud from her supply case and placed a fragment of his ship's cryo core at his feet. The mirror had reflected grief. Carter had turned it into light. She would make sure he became the message. A signal was sent later that day, not to the council, but to the stars. A beacon encoded with Jonah Carter's memories, with Kyrith's voice woven through like song. It didn't ask for help. It didn't beg for recognition. That simply told the truth. That it spoke of a species that had vanished, not out of cowardice, but courage. Of a man who had loved children that weren't his with such ferocity that the cosmos itself remembered them. Of a moment when humanity could have ended in rage, but chose instead to end in grace. And across the galaxy, in places dark and forgotten, that signal spread. Some called it a myth, some called it prophecy, but to those who understood, it was a promise, a reminder that empathy could shape reality. And that the last light of a dying world could still illuminate thousands more. Kyrith never returned to the council. She left her title behind. She became a wanderer, not to escape, but to carry the story. And wherever she went on asteroid colonies, drifting markets, hidden moons, she told of Jonah Carter, of the mirror, of the way one human reached across silence and turned sorrow into peace. And when asked if it was true, she would only smile and say, I was there, I heard him. And the stars, as if remembering too, would shimmer a little brighter.